my name is Stephanie and I'm the Learning Manager here at the Museum of Australian Democracy at Old Parliament House. We are a beautiful building of historic spaces, but also we get to talk about the importance of your voice in our democracy. Now today we are in the House of Representatives chamber. This space was where debates happened and laws were made. From 1927 until 1988, for 61 years, our federal politicians worked in this beautiful chamber. Now, I wonder what you're starting to notice that's standing out to you in this beautiful space. Perhaps you can see all of the green from the carpet to the chairs, or you might be noticing the gold mace on the table, but I'll come back to that one. Perhaps you can see all the way down the central table and you're noticing all of the objects that are there, or the speaker's chair right at the back there. If you look up, you might also be able to see the press gallery behind me, where the journalists used to work, as well as the public galleries around us, where members of the public, like you, would have been able to sit and find out what your member was saying here in Parliament.
Mr. Chairman, the Prime Minister on Thursday night last
But its great function is to preserve the value of money.
15.5% of growers in the wheat.
It was reckless and irresponsible 12 months ago. It's courageous and necessary today.
Let's take a closer look at some of the items here in the House of Representatives. So you may have noticed on the table here this golden mace. It's a symbol of our ties to Britain. I wonder if you noticed the crown on the top. It's got a symbol of Old Parliament House, but also the coat of arms on there. As we head around this side of the table, you may notice the books running down the centre. These are called Hansard, and Hansard is a record of everything that's said in Parliament. And we have a very important person that used to work in this chamber, well, many of them actually, and they would sit on this seat here. Now, the reason that it's a flat bench is because they need to keep going. Even when it was their break, we'd have to swap out the Hansard reporter, so they'd easily be able to slide off the seat and the next person could sit down and keep going. But let's head around the other side of the table and see some other important objects. Here is a very important seat. This is where the Prime Minister would have sat. And of course, on the other side of the table is where the opposition leader would have sat. We've got our dispatch boxes, another symbol of our traditions and ties to Britain. And it's where you'll often see the Prime Minister speaking from this particular podium. Now behind me, some very important seats. This is where our front benches would have sat. They're also our ministers, and behind them you've got the back benches. Now the interesting thing to note about this particular chamber is you'll see that there are drawers underneath running along the bottom, and they've got little desks. Sometimes, because our building was so small, this would have been their office. They would have worked, kept all of their important documents here in the chamber. Interestingly, this chamber was the home of our first female MP, Enid Lyons. Now, she was here in 1943.
That my advent into Parliament will be productive of some good, I can merely hope. And I think that the first immediate benefit from the entry of women into Parliament is that other women will be induced to take a great interest in political and public affairs in general, and that must be to the general good of the whole community.
I want you to take a moment to imagine working in a space that was dominated by men and you being the first female to work in here, to be elected by your local community, to represent them in the chamber and sit in one of these seats.
I had wonderful kindness shown me in Parliament. The men there were wonderful to me. You can imagine how I felt going there, making my first speech. My lips were stiff when I started. I could hardly enunciate a word, but I felt the kindness of all these men sitting there, all wishing me well, I knew, even though they weren't on my side of politics. And I found my feet and I got going and I went through all right.
What a tough job for the first female. And last, we've got some very important seats right up here at the front. These are our clerks. They know all the rules and how this chamber needs to function, and their job is to support the Speaker. So here we have one of our most prized objects here at the museum, the Speaker's chair. I'm sure you can see how grand it is. This was a very special gift to us in 1927 when our Parliament opened from Britain. Now you may notice some interesting features, mainly that it has the British coat of arms on the top there. So you'll notice the lion and the unicorn, another symbol of our Westminster ties. But the person who got to sit in the Speaker's chair was very important to our Parliament. They were chosen by their colleagues, by members sitting in this chamber to keep order and to watch over the chamber and make sure that everyone was following the rules. And you know what? That includes the Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister wasn't being respectful, wasn't taking their turn, then the Speaker could send them out of the chamber. So one of our very significant speakers who would have sat in this chair was Joan Child.
She badly wanted the Speaker's job and enjoyed being deputy.
Oh, I guess I've always liked organising things. The family would tell you I like being bossy.
And she was our first woman to take on this role in 1986.
When Sergeant-at-Arms Lynn Simons enters for tomorrow afternoon's Parliament opening ceremony, she will usher Mrs Joan Child into parliamentary history. Last year, an onlooker. This year, replacing the retired Dr Harry Jenkins as the boss, the first Madam Speaker in the House of Representatives.
I think it will be welcomed by women all over Australia, whether they're interested in politics or whether they're opposing my politics. I think just as I welcomed the first woman judge, they'll welcome this. It's one more little chink.
And she had a very strong voice. Imagine if you were the Speaker, how you would say, "Order, order," to make sure that you can keep control over all of these rowdy members sitting in here.
Has in the space, Madam Speaker, has in the space of just 5 budgets wiped that dismal...
Now you may notice some decorations on the side here, some intricate detail that you can see in the wood carvings. So we've got some Latin words down the side, floral emblems, and also this isn't the Speaker's chair that they took to Australian Parliament House. Obviously, it's still here in Old Parliament House. So I wonder if you know what the Australian Parliament House Speaker's chair looks like. It has beautiful symbols of wattle on it and very simple decorations. If you were creating a Speaker's chair, what important symbols would you want to have on it that represent Australia, that represent our people and who we are? So here we've got the radio booth. So think back in the early days before we had television, one of the main ways that people would find out what was happening here in the chamber, what their members were saying, was by listening to the radio. They'd all sit around their lounge room and they'd gather in to be able to hear what was happening here in Parliament.
Good morning. This is the ABC from the House of Representatives, Parliament House in Canberra. It's fine and sunny in the federal capital this morning. Both houses are sitting. The Senate meets at 11 o'clock Eastern Australian time. We now await the arrival of the Speaker, Mr Snedden.
The Speaker, Mr Snedden, takes his place.
And here we have the whisper rooms. So, you may have noticed that the chamber has lots of wood finishes, and so it was very hard to have a private conversation. And so we have these special rooms within the chamber where our members could have those secret conversations they didn't want anyone else to hear. So you may have noticed this big box that we've got here in the chamber. This is really important for heritage reasons, because what you're looking at is exactly what the furniture looked like in 1988 when the members left. All of the other seats that we have around the chamber, we let the public and lots of school students that come and visit us sit in them. So it's really important for us to have an example of exactly what it was like when members worked in this building. So how do you get a job working in the House of Representatives? Well, the people that work in here are elected by their local community. A person over 18 can decide to run for election and they'll go up against other people. You may have seen campaigns where they've got posters and they're talking about things that they're passionate about, and then Australians will vote for who they want to represent them. Now we have a very unique system here in Australia. We have preferential voting, which means that your preferences when you're picking are really important. So it's not just about picking one person, but it's about ordering your first, second, third, and fourth preference. So that perhaps if your first person doesn't have the votes needed to be successful in this chamber, they'll look at who you pick second. Now, here in Australia, in the House of Representatives, these seats are made up of electorates, so it's based on population. Now, can you vote? Are you able to vote in the next election, or are you a little bit too young? Well, once you turn 18, you can enrol to vote, and if you're an Australian citizen. But there's been lots of discussions about whether we should lower the voting age. It's a big privilege. It's actually a right and a responsibility that we get to participate in the voting process. Because do you know what? Democracy is all about people power, and that means all of us. And the people power comes by us choosing who sits here, who's going to talk about the issues which are important to our local area. I also wonder where our ministers that sit in here, our MPs, get their ideas from. Well, that's from your local community. And something that's really important to us is you knowing that you have lots of people that represent you. So here in Canberra, you have your federal representatives, but you will also have a state parliament where you have state representatives, and you probably have a local council as well. What's important to know is that all these different groups of people are there to represent you, and they all look after different things. So if you have a particular issue, it's really important to check who might be the best person to support you. You may even find that it's someone within your school community, that you might have a parents and friends committee, or you have a student representative council, or a group of leaders. There are lots of people that help us move forward and create positive change. I wonder what qualities you think are important for a representative to have. I'm thinking a good listener, be able to work with others, perhaps being able to see issues from lots of different perspectives so we can get the best outcome for all of us. If you had a seat in this chamber, if you were a member of Parliament, I wonder what issues would be important to you. What messages would you want to share with others? Okay, now it's your turn to pretend you're an MP and you have a seat in this chamber. Let's write a speech. I wonder what you'd like to say. I wonder what issues are important to you. What research might you need to do? This is a great opportunity to write out your speech and to say it in front of your family and friends, perhaps your classmates, or you might like to record it. Now that reminds me, I think it's time for my speech.